The Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
Welcome to the Formed Book Club. We discuss Henri de Lubac, the drama of the Atheist Humanism. Last session, we covered 5 pages. At this rate, it'll only take us 370 from 470, maybe only 20 more weeks to do this. I think we'll move a little further on, though.
Well, we are talking about a Russian novelist.
Well,
so.
that's true. First of all, there's an erratum
Yes.
that Vivian wants to correct.
Yes. Last time I said that Christianity came to Kiev in 899. It was actually 988. So, yes.
Right. It's basically at the turn of the millennium, almost.
Yes.
So, Joseph, we left on page 369, I think it was, quoting various things.
That sounds about right, yes.
Go ahead. Tell us where to go next.
Well, if you want to fast forward, I had loads of things highlighted up until page 369, but I have nothing else until 377, so please leap in.
Vivian?
Well, I love this next section, even though I don't have a lot underlined. The fact is that, yeah, I finally do. Where de Lubac is dealing with this mystery of the person. He says, in every man there's a mystery. On page 371, he echoes St. Paul, I don't do the good I want to do. I do the bad I don't want to do. In every man there is this struggle. And we sort of touched on that last time. And so it can look like a split personality that Dostoevsky has, but in fact, he's simply revealing all of the different traits within himself and within other people, and being actually painfully honest about the mess we really are, which is why he did not have any hope in progress and science and all these things to fix man.
Yeah, he was very much a realist in terms of his understanding of human anthropology. And that I think is why his novels are so great, ultimately.
And I absolutely love this metaphor on 374 about the vanishing point. This trying to get a grip on the picture of the way things are, and down toward the bottom last of the first major paragraph on 374, the vanishing point is outside the picture, and yet strictly inherent in it, outside the field of psychology and in the spirit. This idea of the vanishing point, if you've studied drawing, you learn that everything in your picture, to have the proper perspective, all the lines are going toward a point. But that point is off the piece of paper. In fact, if you put it on the paper, let's say put an X, your lines will be so tight, it'll look obscene, what you've just drawn. The vanishing point actually has to be outside, and all the light. So this image, I thought, what a beautiful image. We try to see ourselves, but the vantage point for looking at ourselves is off the paper.
Yeah. What gives you perspective is not in the picture.
Yes. There. Thank you for putting it succinctly. What gives you perspective is not in the picture. I thought that was just a beautiful way of being humble about knowing ourselves. So then who does have the perspective? God has it.
Joseph, do you have something on 377?
Yeah, if nobody has anything before that. I wanted to just question the paragraph, the only full paragraph on that page.
On 377?
Yeah.
377, yeah. So hence the ambiguous nature of such states, according to whether we just take them literally or see in them signs, that is to say, real symbols. This notion of ambiguity is one of the most important to bear in mind when interpreting Dostoevsky. It is not far removed from that of dualism, with this difference, however, that in dualism, as the name indicates, there are two clearly marked contrasting poles, whereas in ambiguity, the duality that already exists remains latent and not yet differentiated. I just want to quibble with that. I've got 3 question marks in the margin. If you look at, for instance, St. Augustine's book on Christian doctrine, when he talks about signs, the purpose of signs is to point us towards the real and to allow us to talk about the real. It's a way of communicating the real to each other and to ourselves, first of all, and then to each other. So the reduction of the literal from the allegorical, shall we say, to either dualism, which is sort of schizophrenic, or ambiguity, which is sort of postmodern, both or either and make up your own mind, I think is dangerous. I think that the purpose of words and the purpose of signs is to define and not to confuse, ultimately. And I think that's what Augustine says in De Doctrina Christiana.
But isn't this related to what you would call applicability, where something can be real and also a sign pointing beyond itself to something else, so that there's ambiguity or dualism there in the thing itself?
I would say that a multiplicity of meanings is not dualism, and nor is it relativism. In other words, that if you look at a sunset and see both the physicality of it and also the beauty of God's presence and also the beauty in itself, you're not sort of dissolving meaning into disintegrating particles, as the postmoderns would say. What you're doing is giving a multifaceted dimension to the reality you're looking at, which comes from God.
Yes, but if you look at the lembas in The Lord of the Rings, it's real food, but it also points to the Eucharist, even though it's not the Eucharist.
As you're using that example, even within the literal meaning, the most powerful thing about lembas is not the nourishing of the body, but the feeding of the will. So even then, there's a power to lembas, which is not purely nutritional in the physical sense; it's spiritual. And obviously,
but it's not the body. But it's not the body.
When it points beyond itself to the other life bread, it's not. There's not an ambiguity there. There's a deepening, right? That it's both. Right? It's not. It's not either one or the other, or we don't really know. It's both. It's both lembas and the Blessed Sacrament.
That's one of the meanings of ambiguous. So maybe the word ambiguous is ambiguous too.
Well, I think it helps if we remember that this chapter is called "The Experience of Eternity," and what de Lubac, I think, is talking about is these experiences that people have where they're getting glimpses of eternity, perhaps. I mean, like, for example, when he uses epilepsy as an example of, for Dostoevsky's characters who are epileptic, and Dostoevsky himself, who was epileptic, these experiences seemed to open to something beyond, and I use the word seem to because there is a discernment that is needed to parse out, and sometimes we can't completely parse out what is a physical. I've got chemicals firing in my brain, literally during an epileptic fit. These nervous synapses, whatever they're doing, there's something physical happening to the brain, and yet it's affecting the mind, which is not all physical. It's affecting the spirit, which is not physical. So there's room for ambiguity in that. I think we need to be a bit humble about how we interpret these kinds of experiences. And I think that's kind of what de Lubac is talking about. Not is the Eucharist a sign and a symbol, and also what it affects and all that. He's not talking about these kinds of things. I think he's more talking about, for lack of a better expression, mystical experience that human beings have.
I agree, Vivian. We have to distinguish between our subjective experience of something and the objective reality of a thing. But I do think the distinction is important, and we mustn't lose the importance of that distinction. Give me one example, by the way, of what we're talking about here, going back to Tolkien. Tolkien says in his essay on fairy stories, nature is no doubt a life study, and also a study for eternity for those so gifted. In other words, you can look at nature purely scientifically, purely materially, and that's good. But you can also look at it and see in it the presence of good, the presence of God, which is also good and perhaps better. And I don't think those things are, well, again, I think Father made a good point. There's more than one meaning to the word ambiguous, and that's probably the problem. But, that, to me, the word ambiguity is used so much in postmodernism, which we have to deal with all the time,
Yes.
that I'm always on the alert and on the defense
Yes.
against the use of the word.
And then, when de Lubac on 375, before your quote, when he talks about, the gate,
Where is it?
this is in the bottom of the middle there, middle of the bottom, I don't know.
That's ambiguous.
He, I'm assuming Dostoevsky, does not picture the spiritual world as a hidden substratum that, while of course impenetrable by the normal ordinary man, yields to the explorations of the being with better or different gifts. For him, this spiritual world, this domain of eternity, is, in a concrete sense, the gospel, and the only way to enter it is by means referred to in the gospel, metanoia, or new birth. The gate of the kingdom is opened as well as guarded by the mystery of the cross.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
It is. Is that it for that section? The section on,
Yes.
which was titled Dualisms and Symbols. The next section is 3, the new birth. Joseph?
Well, I don't have any. Well, I have something on 381. So does anybody beat that?
Well, on 380 in the middle there, the two scenes, because this is critical for the rest of this chapter, the two scenes we now have to examine are purely Christian inspiration. And it's only in the light of these scenes that the passages already analyzed can find their true exegesis and take on their ultimate significance. So he's saying that the two scenes by which you must interpret everything else in Nazi are what? The first is Raskolnikov, and he wants, at the bottom of the page there, to read him a passage of the account of the raising of Lazarus. And then on page 381, that quote at the bottom there, but then the miracle happened. But this is the beginning of another story, the story of progressive renewal of a man, of his regeneration, of how he gradually passed from one world to another and came to know a new reality that had hitherto been beyond his ken. So ends Crime and Punishment. So it's really a novel of redemption for Raskolnikov here.
Yeah, I actually highlighted, that's the passage of 381 I highlighted, and what I wrote at the bottom, again, coming back to Tolkien, as I invariably do, eucatastrophe, because of course that right at the end there of Crime and Punishment is this sudden joyous turn, as you say, Father, redemption.
And it's just the beginning for Raskolnikov, right? This new birth.
Right.
Now he's going to have to walk the way, right? You get reborn in order to do what? In order to live as the new man. Well, that doesn't just happen overnight. It takes now discipleship and purification. And so some
It's
people...
like as if the novel, you have the crime, right? You have Raskolnikov's crime, the murder. You have the punishment, which is the rest of the novel, which, bearing in mind the eucatastrophic end is purgatorial, not infernal. And then you have what happens following the novel, at the end of the novel. And I'm reminded here to Lewis now, the end of the last battle, right? This is the end of all the stories. But for them, it's the beginning of the real story.
That's right.
I found this interesting, page 382 in the middle. He, that is, Dostoevsky, would not have written an analog to Tolstoy's Resurrection. A moral of that kind would have bored him. But actually something quite different was involved here. The discovery of a new reality, in quotes, the entry into a new world. That indeed interested him enormously, but that was untellable. So it's the point of intersection, with the point of perspective again. What he's trying to get at, he can't tell, but he wants to point to it.
Right.
It's the climax of the Paradiso, right, where the greatest poet who ever lived, arguably, is lost for words, right, in the presence of the beatific vision. what can I now say?
384, anybody before that?
Nope.
I've just got a side swipe at Gide on 383, as he was the topic of a couple of sessions back. We've got just 4 lines down on page 383. We've got de Lubac's commentary upon Gide. Here, his interpretation of Dostoevsky rests upon a translation that, it seems to me, is rather taking liberties with the text for the benefit of the doctrine. And I highlighted that just because of the dangers, of course, of bad translation. And when we're reading something in translation and we can't check the original because we are ignorant of the language, we do have to be able to trust authorities other than ourselves that this is a bona fide, good, reliable translation that doesn't tamper with the text for whatever ideological or other reasons.
384, new paragraph. The kingdom to which Raskolnikov gains access is a world of fellowship. In the name Raskolnikov, there is Raskol, which means schism, division. He's been cut off from his brother men by his crime, and more especially by his pride in his theory, which led to that crime. So again, the new reality is communion, but it's not a communion of the order we're used to. It's something untellable beyond.
I read somewhere, Father, I can't remember where, that word there, that root word rascal, is the same thing for rascal in English. Has the same etymological root.
I can't gainsay that.
And so, but pointed to this, that it takes this rebirth, conversion, and now this discipleship. So Dostoevsky, at the bottom of 384, he warns us that in themselves improvements, meaning these attempts to socially engineer society, right? These improvements can do nothing to solve the problem of man and of human fellowship. The most perfect of societies might be the most horrible of hells. I'm just thinking now, for example, in China, where people are literally under 24/7 surveillance in order to keep them from doing wrong. And I mean, we're under 24 surveillance by the Holy Spirit. So we Christians ought to be, more circumspect before we open our mouths or do something. Nevertheless, can you imagine this attempt to bring about perfect behavior on the part of citizens? What a hell this would be to know. Now, we here in this country could easily go in this direction, but what a hell this would be to be under the constant scrutiny of the members of your government bureaucracy.
I say, would you rather be watched every moment of the day by our Lord Jesus Christ or by Big Brother? I mean, it's not a difficult choice, is it?
Yeah. So, page 386, he's summing up here. The mystery of the new man and of the new birth, glimpsed at the end of Crime and Punishment, reappears in the brothers Karamazov. Skip a line. Like Raskolnikov, Mitya is a man who has been brought back to life. So, again, but Mitya now, just like was it Sonia for Raskolnikov?
Yes, Sonia was the one who got Raskolnikov a copy of the Bible,
right.
and
here in the Brothers Karamazov is Alyosha, who's going to basically bring back Mitya.
And the thing that's so interesting about Mitya, even though he's not the murderer of his father. Spoiler alert for any of you who haven't read the novel yet. And yet he's about to be punished for this crime, and it's through false testimony and false condemnation that he nevertheless is redeemed. How about that?
At the bottom of page 386, there again, I'm coming back to Gide. Others, including Gide, understanding Alyosha in the light of Mishkin, and that again, a few sessions back, we looked at the Holy Fall and Gide's misreading of the character of Prince Mishkin. But if there's an undoubted kinship of soul between these two young men, Alyosha and Mishkin, the differences between them are just as great. Alyosha is neither mentally backward nor maladjusted. He is capable of manly decision. So the whole idea that the holy foolishness cannot be devoid of or divorced from reason. That basically, that you can be humble to the point of seeming simple, but nonetheless, you have to be subject to the logos.
Anything before 389?
No.
Top of the page. Do we not feel at this point that those beings whose ambiguous ecstasies had left us perplexed are all gathered round Alyosha? Is it not here that the great mystic current that runs through Dostoevsky's work receives its meaning?
Yep.
And then about 2/3 down, the changing of the water into wine stands for the process by which the human being becomes divine, the transition from natural life to life according to the Spirit. The ecstasy that followed in the garden was actually that. We do not know in what it consisted, and neither Dostoevsky nor Alyosha himself could have described its substance. So once again, it's the new life, the new man, the ecstasy, which we can't describe, but it's a transformation. Middle of page 390. The mysticism of the brothers Karamazov is the mysticism of the resurrection.
Mm-hmm. It is eschatological, and that's so important. It's not situated in the temporal powers, in the here and now. Even though we partake of it now, it is something that is of another world. And
if we can all jump onto each other here, because that was my next quote. Father read the mysticism of the brothers Karamazov is the mysticism of the resurrection. Then you, Vivian, continued. It is eschatological, and I actually highlighted also the third sentence. It is out of the fourth gospel, but also that of the apocalypse.
yes.
Again, this is just absolutely profound. I think the important thing here, I think what Father said about the quote on the previous page, is that which is inexplicable is not necessarily, it's not therefore unreal. I mean, that's the point of the palace of glass, right? We can't explain something that it is therefore ipso facto and not a reality. No, on the contrary, there are things that happen. The most important things that happen, resurrection. Not just in that mystical resurrection in the soul, right? Conversion. These are not things that can be explained in purely material terms, and to say that therefore it's not true is clearly nonsense.
Yeah, it's the vanishing point off the page again, right? And
Yeah,
this is what Christian hope. This is what Christian hope is about.
Yeah,
and Lubach has a characteristic of his writing that he often ends these chapters with something which really sums it up in a poetic way, and he does it here, 391. Mm-hmm. First, he quotes from the brothers Karamazov. Karamazov, exclaimed Kolya, is it true, as religion says, that we rise from the dead, that we shall see each other again, all of us, Ilyusha too? To be sure, we shall rise again. We shall see one another again, and we shall joyfully recount all that has happened to us, replied Alyosha, half laughing, half eager. Oh, how lovely that will be, said Kolya. And then to Lubach, with this ingenuous dialogue, this childish conversation which is appended to Alyosha's ecstasy, Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky ends the Brothers Karamazov, his last work completed in the year of his death. I mean, that really puts...
it's poetic, because what he's really saying there is these are Dostoevsky's last words. This is Dostoevsky's final judgment upon life and his own work.
Then that concludes the chapter. He has just a 2-page conclusion. I want to have someone read the first paragraph and the last couple of sentences.
Joseph.
Well, how about if I read the first paragraph and Vivian reads the last couple of sentences then? How about that?
Okay,
I
good.
had highlighted the first couple of 3 sentences of the conclusion, but I'll read the whole of that paragraph, which is, yeah, beautiful. Thus, all this body of work, this dreadful work, ends in a hymn of hope. The whole of it is a hymn of hope. That is its underlying meaning. Dostoevsky is the prophet of the other life. The truth he announces is not a discarnate truth, to use a word so often misused today. On the contrary, his realism is of the most vigorous type, but it bears no resemblance to a positivist truth. It is a truth that shocks. Yet, if it sets itself against any attempt on the part of man to establish eternal life in this world, its purpose is not to leave him weighed down by a miserable lot. It is to reclaim him from a path that leads nowhere. He is the prophet of unity, which presupposes a breach to be healed. The prophet of the resurrection, which presupposes the experience of death.
That's so beautiful.
Yep.
It is absolutely beautiful. He's such a beautiful writer as well as a beautiful thinker.
And what do you want me to read, Father? Nobody.
Yeah.
At the bottom of 394. Nobody had less indulgence for that impatience of limitations, to quote Stanislas Fumé, the only effect of which is to enslave us more harshly. But no one, perhaps, has given us so much hope that one day we may be freed from them. So
he's impatient with limitations. We don't like all these limitations. We want to grow more. We want to be more. We want to have more wealth. We want to have more friends, and so on. We don't like to be limited. But that enslaves us. The only effect of which is to enslave us, because we can't get rid of our limitations in this life. But no one perhaps has given us so much hope that one day we may be freed from them, but eschatologically.
That's right.
Good. I don't know what time we are, but I think it's time to quit.
We have a bit more time, and if maybe and that's a climax. And I saw this as a postscript will be an anticlimax. But I wanted to ask a question. So after that brilliant first paragraph there, I just put 3 question marks in the margin. I just really want to pose the question to both of you because I don't know. Death, it has been said, is the only metaphysical experience. What on earth does de Lubac mean there?
Well, it's only through death that we truly and completely pass out of this world. And so if you think about the mystical experiences of Dostoevsky's characters, including the epileptic fit, it's almost like a dress rehearsal for death. What the epileptic in that fit is experiencing is like an out of body, like you're dying, like you're, So I think Dostoevsky saw that, in fact, when you think about our own faith experience, our own faith journey, it's near-death experiences or coming up against the limits, if I go another step, I'm going to fall off this cliff, or I'm rolling my car off of a road, or I'm in a hospital dying, or whatever it might be, or childbirth. St. Paul, why does he say what he says about childbirth? It's a total surrender experience.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with everything you just said, Vivian. But while you were speaking, I actually thought also something which says that and is that death, of course, is the act of love, right? It's dying to ourselves. And there can be no metaphysical experience without that experience, right? So in that sense, we have to die to ourselves to have any metaphysical engagement at all. And I only thought about that while you were speaking. I just asked it because I didn't know the answer. And
the really key word in it all is surrender. When we die, that will be the ultimate act of surrender.
Right.
And all through our life as Christians, we're invited to surrender over and over and over again, either through near-death experiences or, missing the bullet by this, whatever, But when we die, that's going to be the ultimate.
Yeah, I think, drawing from that, Vivian, I think it's actually pretty simple. If you think physical and metaphysical, and physical means the physical world, right? That's all we experience. But death is the only metaphysical. That's the only point at which you actually really leave the physical.
That's right.
We can have intuition and stuff, we get ecstasy near death, but that's a glimpse.
That's right.
Death is the passage from the physical to the after, post, higher than
That's right.
physical.
That's right. And so our experience of limitations now, looked at in the light of Christian revelation, our experience of limitations is actually a gift, because it's only when we're up against the limitation, whatever it might be, psychological or physical or whatever it might be, that we really are in that surrendering position vis-a-vis God. And this is why St. Paul can say, in weakness, God's strength is made manifest in me.
Amen. The paradox, the great paradox.
So we'll begin next session with part 4, mystical confrontations. Read the first chapter or so, and have this question in mind. What is a section on mystical confrontations? What does it have to do with this book on Dostoevsky and the drama of Humanism? All right. Thanks, everybody. God bless you all.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at forumedbookclub.ignatius.com.